Hi, I'm Chris, and in this showcase we're shifting phases with the Playertron Periodic Allpass Filter. Before we get to the Periodic Allpass Filter, let's take a quick detour to explore what Allpass filters actually do. Here we have a very simple setup, a sine oscillator and an Allpass filter. We can observe the resulting waveform with our trusty Weevil multi-oscilloscope. Here's the original signal in red and the Allpass filtered signal in green. As you can see nothing. Currently, both signals are the same. But if I move the cutoff frequency towards the frequency of the oscillator, we can see the sine wave moving forward and backward, relative to the original signal. When we set the cutoff frequency to the same value as the oscillator, the phase is inverted. We can conclude that an Allpass filter shifts or delays specific frequencies. Shifting a single sine wave is pretty boring, to be honest. But if we take a signal with more harmonics, the Allpass filter shifts these harmonics differently according to their proximity to the cutoff frequency. This does not alter the sound in itself, but changes the resulting waveform. To demonstrate the effect of this, here's a little additive setup. We simulate the first 8 partials of a saw wave with the help of the accurate Weevil phase distortion oscillator and the additive frequency helper pitch harmonics from Monkey Business Audio. Right now, we can see that the level adjusted sum of all partials roughly resembles a saw wave. If we now move the phase of various partials, we can observe how the resulting waveform shifts and morphs into different shapes, but the actual output still sounds the same. If it all sounds the same, why even bother? Well, I'm glad you asked. The waveform basically represents a changing amplitude over time. With this, we can transform the response of audio processors that react to a signal's amplitude, like saturation and distortion. Or we can mix various versions of the same sound with shifted versions of itself to produce phasing effects. Remember, a waveform mixed with an inverted version of itself cancels out. In theory, Allpass filters are the building block of many other effects, like phasers and reverbs. So having a fully controllable and stackable Allpass filter at hand is always great. Introducing the Playertron Periodic Allpass Filter. With a form factor and design language similar to the Playertron Jadwiga, it should be clear that this module is also meant as a building block for your creative effects. However, one single periodic Allpass filter on its own can already lead to endless sonic potential. Looking at its front panel alone, it has a lot going on. Talking about the front plate, let's familiarize with the inputs, outputs and control elements. The most important checks are at the very top, the main input and main output. Right below the output check is a signal knob, which can be thought of as the cutoff frequency knob on a more traditional Allpass filter. Below that there's the state control, which isn't quite like a resonance or width control that you might expect from an Allpass filter. The state rather interacts with the signal control to bend the signal's phase. In practice, this introduces a layered and shifted version of the original signal. The original signal can also be added back into the mix with this slider in the middle. By increasing its value, more of an unaltered signal is mixed into the output alongside the shifted signal for an interesting phase cancellation effect. Following the signal path leads us to the memory knob, which is one of my personal favorite features. Memory breaks the actual Allpass filters in a way to create a makeshift delay with some interesting properties. Increasing the memory value produces all kinds of funky feedback behavior and interesting shapes, from a complete phasey mess to metallic reverb-esque scapes. Touching this knob is always rewarding, and even more so in combination with the small golden memory spread knob located here. These two knobs push the circuit out of its normal schematic, whatever that means. What's for sure though, metallic resonances galore and a surplus of smeary shifting. To the left of the memory knob is a deaf knob, and this one is a little odd. Per default, it actually does nothing. indicated by the red LED in its mid. Only if you connect the modulation source to the modulate input, the depth knob becomes active, which is shown by the LED turning blue. And now it determines the amount by which the modulation affects the signal knob. As per usual with Playertron modules, all knobs are motorized and therefore reflect the current value at all times, and they move with the modulation. The small knob to the upper left of the signal knob becomes very important here. It introduces a bias into the modulation path to offset the position around which the signal knob is modulated. Speaking of modulation, the Periodic Allpass filter comes with batteries included, meaning it has its own small LFO. Select the waveform with this slider and set the speed with this knob. Now all that's left to do is connect its output to the modulation input. On the right hand side of the module, you can turn the effect off with the small on button. Set the output level of the affected signal with this knob and temporarily bypass all modulation with the mod button. You might have spotted the two big blue buttons and their corresponding outputs in this area. These are alternate versions of the signal and state. The former is a slightly altered version of the input, whereas the latter is an altered version of the output. These can be mixed with the actual output or used in intricate feedback loops. The buttons above these two outputs simply invert the according output. Now there's a whole plethora of input and output checks on either side we haven't talked about yet. Basically, each major control on the interface has a dedicated input and output check that allow for easy chaining of multiple instances of the Periodic Allpass filter. Much like Jadwiga, each output mimics the level of the control, and each input sets the control value. You can chain multiple Periodic Allpass filter modules with different bias knob settings to create otherworldly phaser effects or eroding metallic reverb smears. The signal input has one more trick going on. Below its input check, there is a little switch that switches the interpretation of input voltages here. You can either set it to chain mode or modulation CV mode. The first, as the name suggests, is for chaining multiple instances. The modulation CV mode should be used when you feed another modulation signal into this input to control the signal value. As we have already learned, Allpass filters introduce all kinds of delays and shifts in the phases of a signal's frequency content, altering its waveform. Naturally, distortion comes to mind. Here we're going to use the input saturation stage of Jadwiga and its low-pass filter as a distorting filter. Observe how the character of the sound changes when we play with the Periodic Allpass filter's parameters. Allpass filters are essential in modern electronic sound design. Usually they are hidden behind more complex effects, such as combs, flanges or reverbs. But Allpass filters are at the base. With the memory and memory spread knob, we can elicit some metallic reverb-esque characteristics from a dynamic signal. Chain multiple Periodic Allpass filters that are modulated by the same source, but have different bias values to create your own personal take on a phaser. Introduce non-linearities and feedback loops to take it even further. Mix and match the outputs and tweak to your liking to inject a different character into your signal. The tone can change vastly by the slightest turn of a knob, adding resonances and character to your sound. I hope this was inspiring to you. Leave a like and ask questions in the comments. And as always, have fun patching. See you around.